Hello friends, welcome again. In this special video, I will talk about how you can go about answering the interview question. Describe a time when you were criticized either by your supervisor, your manager, your boss, or by any colleague, and how did you go about handling that criticism. Now here, let me call out there is no right or wrong answer. But then the question comes, if there is no right or wrong answer, can I just say anything? Well, no, you can't just say anything. And that is why we are here in this video, where I will explain to you how you can go about handling this question. So what I will talk in this video is why the interviewer is asking this question, because it is very important for us to understand why are they asking the question, what is the intent behind. Second is how do you structure your answer. Third is any watchouts. And fourth, I will share some examples that you can either copy paste or take influence or inspiration from with regards to your own answer as you formulate your own answer. So let's get going into the video and let's start by talking why is the interviewer asking this question. Now, the core reason the interviewer is asking this question is one, to understand whether you can handle a challenging situation where someone gives you a feedback. Can you handle that situation or not? Second, do you accept criticism? And then do you work on it and improve and get better and fix it? So one, is there acceptability? And second, do you work on it to get better? Thirdly, are you okay with different management styles? Different kind of people will have different styles, different way of managing people, different way of interacting with people. Are you comfortable with different type of people or different type of management styles around you? And lastly, are you self-aware enough to know that anytime you are given criticism, you do understand it and that you've had opportunities in past on which you've worked? So are you self-aware to know that yes, you as a human being, as an individual, will always have opportunities and you are ready to fix and work on them? So these are kind of the key reasons why the interviewer is asking you this question. Now let's get going into the structure. How do you structure your answer for this particular question? Now, one call out before we move forward. In case you find any value from this video, I have to ask for you. One, press the like button as this keeps me motivated. Second, press the subscribe button along with the bell icon so you get notified as soon as I put a new content on this channel. On this channel, I post content pertaining to financial and career success for early and mid-career professionals. So if this is something which is of interest to you, please do subscribe. Other than that, if you want me to continue making unbiased content like this, you can support me on patreon.com. I will leave the link to my Patreon page in the description of this video. Now let's get rolling back into the video. Now, talking about the structure, first and foremost, you need to go back in your history, in your work history and experience, and see any instance or any time you were working on a project or on a task where you had a situation where you were given a feedback. What was that feedback? Who gave you that feedback? And how did you act on that feedback? Which is, how did you respond in time on that feedback in the moment that you were given the feedback? And how did you respond on it over the later periods or over a couple of days or over the periods in future that happened? So how did you kind of adapt to it? How did you kind of reflect on the feedback and improve yourself? So you have to think of an example where you had these instances. Once you have that example, then we go about how you can go around presenting that example in your interview. So for that, I will talk the structure. First and foremost, start with the context or the background. What were you doing? What was the project? What was the project type? What were you trying to achieve? Just for the interviewer to be familiar with the situation. It is very important that the interviewer is familiar with the situation. He or she can be in your shoes to understand what were you working on. So once you're given the feedback or once you start talking about the feedback, they can start to relate to it. But if they don't understand the context at all, it would be very difficult for them to relate to the example itself. For them to relate to the example, it is very important that you make it very simple, very clear to them that what was the context, what was the background, what was the situation. Second is describing the criticism itself, which is what was the feedback or the criticism that you received. Here, make sure you avoid being negative, and especially being negative about the person who's giving you the feedback. Rather, only and only focus on the feedback and how it was communicated to you, and that's it. Don't focus on the person who was communicating this feedback to you. Third, and the most important part, is how did you react to this feedback? Here, you need to come across as someone who was open to listen, open to understand, and was willing to improve. Rather, it could also be an instance where you went to your manager or supervisor and asked them to give you some feedback on how you can improve or how you can do things better. So instead of them coming to you and saying you did this wrong, you can even say that after you completed the project, you went to your manager and you had a session with them just to understand how you can do this better in future or how you can improve on this particular task or this particular project that you did. So in future, when you get this particular task or a similar project or similar task, you can do a better job. And that is where they gave you some feedback with regards to the project, which you took, accepted, and then applied. So come across as someone who goes to their manager or supervisor, whoever is giving them the feedback, with an open mind and actually wants to learn, actually wants to listen to the feedback, and rather is asking for the feedback. So you should come across someone who is willing to change, willing to improve, and is open to whatever is being told to them. Now comes the part of action. So what did you do with that feedback? You took that feedback, how did you improve on it? So what were the steps that you took in order to implement an improvement plan? What was that improvement plan, and how did you go about implementing that improvement plan? So these are all the actions that you took, and then how did you bring those actions or that implementation or improvement plan into action itself? So next time when you had a task, when you had a project, how did you bring it into action? How did you use all those improvements, all those changes that you brought into yourself? How did you implement them? So you also have to explain that. Next is you talk about the outcome. That is whatever changes you brought in yourself and then implemented or took action on, what results did they bring in? Because if you were given a feedback, let's say the feedback was how you can reduce the number of complaints you were getting, or how you can do the same task in a lesser amount of time or with lesser budgets. Once you were able to implement those changes, that feedback that was given to you, now you were able to perform the same task at a faster pace or with lower budget or with less complaints. So all of these are outcomes which you also have to talk about, that this is what happened once you implemented the feedback. Lastly, you talk about what was the lesson learned. For instance, you can talk about how it made you a better person, how it made you a better employee, how it made you a better manager or a better executor or a better project manager. So all of that is what you learned because of whatever feedback you got, how you implemented, and what was the outcome. You became a better person, better manager, and that was the learning coming out of it. That now you can do the same task with less money, with less amount of hours required, or with less resources required, and this was your learning. Throughout this response, make sure you maintain professionalism. Make sure you come across as someone who's positive, who was willing to learn, who wanted to learn, and hence was able to learn, implement, and came out happy and came out successful. This is what you need to share. Share positivity with the interviewer as against being negative about the situation. Now let me talk about some of the watchouts or some of the key things that you need to consider. Number one is make sure you maintain professionalism. That is, you maintain a positive attitude. You wanted to learn, you went about learning, you took the feedback, you improved on it, and you were happy and you are positive about it, not negative. Second, don't lie. Because if you make up something from scratch, the issue is if the interviewer starts to probe, then you will falter. One, you're already stressed because you are the person who is on the chair, on the interviewing chair and being interviewed. So there's already some level of stress. And suddenly you lie about something and now there are probing questions being asked of you. Suddenly you'll start to falter even more. Secondly, imagine if the same question is asked by another interviewer in the same organization. Because there is one interview that happened with, let's say, with the hiring manager, and then the hiring manager sent you to another manager in their team and they kind of asked the same question. And now you have to remember the lie you said in the first interview. And it would be very much impossible for you to remember the lie. And hence there is a good chance that you will falter and say something which is not coherent, and that would be just end of your hiring process altogether. Next is focus on the positive side. Again, don't talk negative about the person who's giving you the feedback. Don't talk negative about the criticism itself. Like, it has to be a criticism which you are like, yes, this is something I want to improve, this is something I want to implement, versus just saying, no, I didn't agree with the criticism, but I just had to do it because I was forced to do it. No, you need to come across as someone who's positive, who's ready to take feedback, implement it, and improve on it. Don't avoid the answer. Don't say it never happened to me, because it happens to everyone. We are all human beings, and as I said earlier, that you need to come across as someone who's self-aware. Things happen, we make mistakes, but it's okay to admit mistakes and then fix them, improve on them, and come out successful. So don't say it never happened to me or I don't want to answer. That's kind of impossible. That is not true. Another one is make sure you show yourself as someone who's coachable, someone who's willing to learn versus someone who was pushing back on the feedback. So don't show that. And that's why I say at times it's even better that you talk about how you went to the manager or to that individual, ask them for the feedback just because you wanted to improve on how you're working on things. Another one, make sure that the outcome is also positive. So you took feedback, you implemented the feedback, and because of implementing that feedback, you achieved success because the outcome was positive. Not that you implemented the feedback and then you ended up failing. That just doesn't make sense. So it has to be a positive story towards the end. So make sure you spin the story in a way where you come out successful. Now, another thing is to make sure that the example that you give is not detrimental. It's not big, like you didn't bomb a presentation with higher management, or you didn't bring losses or damages to the company, because then while it may be a good learning moment, however, it was so costly that the interviewer might be scared that you ended up engaging into something that was super costly. So you rather have an example which is not very intelligent, but less damaging, because you don't want to come across as someone who did big damage to the previous company. And hence, here some of the things that you can consider is maybe talking about an issue or instance where your assumptions were wrong. So while your approach was right, or while your process that you were following were right, or thinking was right, it's just that your assumptions were wrong. Or maybe you were assuming a lot. So you went with certain assumptions and then you didn't take all the data into consideration. So you can kindly say, I went with a business model, and instead of getting all the data, I used some data and I used some assumptions, and hence I got feedback that I need to use more data in order to make sure that the assessment or the conclusion is concrete, as against just assuming something. So I went back and fixed that. That could be one way of putting it. Or you can talk about how you took up a new role. So you were kind of fresh in the role, you were fresh in the company, or you were doing a new role and you ended up making a mistake. That is also kind of a forgivable mistake. When you're new, you make mistakes, you're expected to make mistakes. You made a mistake, you got feedback, and hence you worked on the feedback and you became better at it as you progressed in the role because you were taking that feedback. That could be another way to kind of have a smart answer to this question. Also, avoid talking about the core skills. So don't say, for instance, if the core skills that the company is looking for is communication, you can't just go about saying that my communication was weak and I was very bad at communicating, and hence there was feedback on me to improve on my communication, because that may give a feeling to the interviewer that maybe you are still not there and your communication is still not at the place where they want it to be, because they are looking for a guy whose communication is like very, very, very good, and maybe your communication used to be bad and now it's only good because you improved on it. So maybe just avoid talking about any of the core skills which are mentioned in the job description itself and focus on something else, because here the idea is just for you to show that you were open, you learned, and you improved. You don't really need to focus on what the issue was, although you have to talk about it, and hence talk about something which is not the core requirement that the company is looking for. Now let's take an example. Let's say you were working on a task or a project where your manager gave you feedback that this particular action plan or strategy needs more refinement, and that you need more clarity in this particular document. So instead of pushing back, first thing what you did was you sat with your manager, you booked some time, and you understood from them exactly what they mean and what are the areas which need more refinement and more clarity. So you are more focused and sharpened into those areas versus just being all over the place. Then you sit down with your colleagues or the key stakeholders and understand from them what is their feedback and how you can make this better and improve on it. You take all that feedback, you put it together, and then you change the document, you change the action plan, you change the strategy, and then you come back to your manager, sit with them again, and share with them the new proposal, new plan, and tell them how you took their feedback and feedback from the stakeholders and incorporated all of that. And after that, you found that the manager was happy, the stakeholders were happy, and the entire team was happy. And eventually it was a successful launch because due to those changes, you were able to make the launch or the project launch or the task itself more stronger, better, and hence it was a success. The learning out of this was always to seek feedback from key stakeholders first before going into implementation phase, because you might be just thinking about what is right in your mind. However, there could be some loopholes or some blind spots that you might be missing, which others can help you improve. So you check with everyone, you seek their feedback, incorporate, and make the project or task even better. Another example could be how your manager came to you and gave you feedback that your performance is kind of decreasing or not up to the mark just because you're overworked. So what you did was you took that feedback positively, you reprioritized your work, and you checked for yourself what are the most important parts of the project or what are the most important priorities, and then you went to your manager and aligned that task list with them. And then you agreed with them that if there are certain projects that can be delayed because they are less of a priority, or there are certain projects that can be just taken off and given to someone else. So you can optimize your work, and once you're able to optimize your work, you can focus more on the core task, on the key task, and make them better, do them better, and do them with perfection. And hence you were able to improve your work, the quality of your work, just because you became more focused. And thanks to your manager for calling this out, for pointing it to you, because otherwise you would have never noticed and you would have just been all over the place working on everything and being very much diluted and not delivering anything with perfection. Just because of that feedback, you were able to identify what were the core tasks, and then you were able to focus on those core tasks and be more laser, be more focused, and do those few tasks with perfection. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully this video would now help you be able to answer this question more smartly. In case you like this video, I'm sure you'll find another video on my channel very helpful, where I talk about how you can go about answering a question on conflict resolution. You can check it out here. Other than that, there is another video where I talk about how you can go about answering a question around failure. You can check out that video here. Thank you.